The moonlight swept across the palace courtyard as Sheikh Hamdan stood beneath the velvet sky, his heart beating like a warrior's drum. In his hand, he held not just a ring, but a promise sealed in centuries of tradition and sealed in his soul by the woman who'd haunted his thoughts, Shamma. Tonight, every breath he drew carried her name, every star above whispered their story, and every corner of the palace held echoes of moments they had shared in silence, glances, and prayers. He had prepared for battles before, on the field, in the courts, within diplomacy, but nothing had stirred him as this question did. Will Shamma accept his hand? Shamma had always been a mystery, a woman cloaked in grace and wisdom, untouched by the noise of royal expectations, her heart guarded like a fortress. She walked with the dignity of a queen, even when she wore no crown, and her words, when she chose to speak, struck deeper than any poem Hamdan had ever written. He remembered the first time he saw her, how time slowed, how voices around him blurred, how the world seemed to hush just to witness the moment. From that day, she became the muse behind every verse he scribed in solitude. But being royalty didn't entitle him to her heart. He knew that. He respected it. He honored her freedom, and now he came only with a question, not a command. The ring, a diamond carved from a legacy, lay inside a box wrapped in red velvet. It bore not just beauty, but stories of his ancestors, waiting for a new chapter. Hamdan had waited not days, but years to speak his truth. He wanted the timing to be perfect, not rushed by politics, not triggered by loneliness, but inspired by real, raw love. And now, the moment had come. He was no longer the silent admirer. He was the man ready to risk it all, his pride, his image, even the peace of his own heart, for the chance to call Shamma his bride. Shamma, on the other hand, had long sensed his devotion. She read it between his lines, felt it in his lingering stares, and heard it in the silences that followed every poetic word he posted on distant nights. But her heart was cautious, carved by experience, protected by lessons and loss. Love to her wasn't just a fairy tale, it was a vow she wouldn't enter lightly. She admired him, yes. She respected his mind, his character, his purpose. But could she accept a life that would expose her to a world where every move is scrutinized? Where freedom dances at the edge of duty? Tonight, as she stood before her mirror, dressed in the soft tones of the desert dusk, Shamma's fingers trembled slightly. She wasn't just considering a man, she was considering a life. Could she be a queen to a man whose world was public, whose legacy was heavy, whose eyes begged for something real amidst the grandeur? Her heart whispered yes, but her mind begged for caution. She had never longed for titles, only truth. And Hamdan, she knew, wasn't offering gold, he was offering something rarer, honesty. He found her in the garden, by the date palms they once laughed beneath. She turned as he approached, and in that moment, there was no palace, no cameras, no protocol, just a man and a woman and a fragile flame between them. His eyes were not royal tonight, they were human, vulnerable, burning with every word he had rehearsed. He knelt, not because tradition demanded it, but because her soul deserved it. With the ring trembling in his palm, he whispered, Shamma, I've waited years to ask you this. Will you be my wife? Not because I'm a sheikh, but because I'm a man who cannot imagine tomorrow without you. Tears gathered in Shamma's eyes, not out of surprise, but out of the weight of the moment. She looked down at the man who had written 1,000 lines for her, who had respected her silence, who had never forced her heart, and she saw not just a ruler, but her equal. Her voice shook as she spoke, Hamdan, you've loved me with patience, with poetry, with soul. You've not chased me, but waited for me, I see your truth. But give me one night, to speak to my heart alone. Hamdan nodded, rising slowly, his heart heavy but hopeful. He respected her need for reflection, after all, she was not a prize to be won, but a soul to be met in full. He left the garden quietly, knowing that tomorrow could either be the beginning of a dream or the return to solitude. But either way, he would love her. He would always love her. That night, Shamma walked barefoot across her chamber, the stars above seeming to pulse with questions. She remembered his kindness, his laughter, the softness behind his strength. She remembered how her name sounded in his voice. She stared at the moon and whispered, show me the answer. And the moon, gentle and ancient, offered no words, only light. But within that light, she found clarity. Morning broke across the palace with golden hues. Hamdan stood at the window, not knowing what message would reach him. And then, like a gentle tide, she came. Dressed in white, her hair flowing free, eyes steady, steps confident. She walked into his chamber, and before he could speak, she held his hand and whispered, "Yes. I accept, not because of what the world sees you as, but because of who you've shown me you are." Tears welled in his eyes as he pulled her into his arms. The courtyard seemed to bloom, the birds sang louder, and time slowed again. In that embrace, centuries of tradition, duty, and royalty faded into something simple and pure. Love. And in that love, Shamma and Hamdan found not just a union, but the beginning of their truest chapter. The moment her "yes" reached his ears, the world around Sheikh Hamdan melted into silence. It was as if the universe itself paused in reverence of a bond so divine, so delicately formed over time. He held her hand longer than necessary, not to anchor her, but to remind himself that this was real, that his heart's whisper had become her answer. She didn't wear a crown, but she radiated the glow of destiny fulfilled. The air between them was now sacred, charged with a promise not made of gold or public ceremony, but of two souls brave enough to choose love. News of Shamma's acceptance swept through the palace like perfume, soft, sweet, and stirring. The royals were stunned into admiration, for this wasn't just another engagement, this was poetry in motion. Hamdan had waited for her with quiet dignity, and Shamma had responded not as one subdued by grandeur, but as a woman deeply aware of her worth. And in that balance of power and humility, they had crafted a tale the poets would struggle to match. Even the older royals, who often raised skeptical brows at Hamdan's choices, found themselves moved. They saw in Shamma not just grace, but the rare ability to walk beside a king without casting a shadow or living in one. Days passed with preparations blooming like spring after a long silence. Designers, artists, and elders came together, yet Hamdan insisted on keeping the wedding rooted in meaning rather than excess. "Let our vows be louder than our celebration," he told the planners. Shamma, too, asked for simplicity. She wanted their union to reflect their journey, elegant, sincere, and untouched by noise. She handwrote personal notes for every guest. She picked local flowers grown under desert stars. She made sure the young girls attending would see a woman unbent by pressure, but risen by purpose. One evening, as twilight bathed the dunes in amber light, Hamdan took Shamma for a private ride through the desert. Their horses moved side by side, hooves brushing golden sands as they spoke of the future. "Will you still love me when my poems grow quiet?" he asked gently. She smiled, brushing her hand against his. "Then I'll write them for you," she said. "I'll become your silence and your voice." And he knew then that she wasn't just his partner in name, she was his mirror, his echo, his shield. As their wedding day neared, letters poured in from every corner of the Arab world and beyond. Poets wrote verses in awe. Young women found courage to seek love that honored them. Men learned that power can kneel without breaking. Shamma had unknowingly become a symbol, a woman who redefined royal love. Not one led by appearances, but anchored in emotional truth. And Hamdan, in loving her, showed the world that the strongest men are those who wait, who listen, who love without possession. The night before the ceremony, Shamma sat by the window in her new quarters, watching the stars blink like shy witnesses to her joy. Her heart was quiet, calm, and certain. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't unsure. She was walking into her fate with eyes wide open. She remembered her late mother's words, "A real man will never dim your light. He will guard it, even when you cannot." And with Hamdan, she had found that guardian. He had seen her, not just the woman in public, but the one who cried when no one watched, the one who feared loss, the one who didn't need to be rescued, just respected. The wedding dawned not with drums or fireworks, but with the call of the muezzin echoing over Dubai. It was as if heaven had sung the first verse of their union. As Shamma walked down the aisle, there was no music, only the soft murmur of admiration and the undeniable stillness of awe. Hamdan stood at the altar, his eyes locked on her like he was watching the first sunrise of his life. He didn't blink. He didn't breathe. For in that walk, Shamma wasn't just coming toward him, she was bringing the rest of his soul he hadn't known was missing. And when they stood together, hand in hand, hearts open and eyes wet with quiet joy, They spoke vows that didn't need to be loud. His voice broke only once, when he said, "I loved you before I knew you. I waited for you even when I didn't know your name." And Shamma, eyes locked on his, whispered, "And I loved you not for your crown, but for the man who chose to love me in silence, in storms, and in stillness." And so, the tale was written. Not just in history, but into the heartbeats of all who witnessed that love could, indeed, be royal. This is me risking everything. And for the first time, I feel truly alive. If my palace burns one day and all my treasures fade, let it be known that I will still have your poem. Because in it lies the true wealth of my life, your heart, naked and noble, offering itself to me without condition. I've never wanted to protect anything more. I will keep it close, like a royal decree written by the one woman whose love made me more than a man, more than a prince, it made me whole. So my darling, this is not just a thank you. This is a vow. A promise from the poet prince whose pen now belongs to you. For every word you gave, I will give 1,000. For every heartbeat you offered, I will shield you with mine. You wrote me into your soul, and I now write you into my legacy. You are my poem, my passion, my majestic muse. And I am forever yours, in love, in verse, in eternity. You are not a risk, my love. You are the reward. You are the dream that woke me up. The prayer that got answered before I even knew how to ask. When I write, I no longer wonder who reads between the lines. Because I want your name to be read in every word, loud and fearless. I want your presence to be known, not as rumor, but as the center